There we go. So hello, everyone, and welcome to JFLA's Financial Literacy Series. My name is Linda Feinholtz, and I'm a proud past president of the Jewish Free Loan Association and past member of the board of directors. So just some housekeeping before we get started. We're going to have a slide up on the screen with our agenda for today so you can see the topics we're going to be covering. Feel free to refer to that as you need to and use the speaker view in Zoom so that you get the best experience today. I know Zoom keeps updating their software and keeps changing things. So depending on where you click, you might have, just the slides or the speaker view. You can manage that on your end to go back and forth between the two. So feel free to do that. I'm going to ask everybody to keep themselves muted. We are, in fact, going to open up for questions after each topic, as well as at the end of the panel discussion. So there's going to be plenty of time. And if you come up with questions, go ahead and click on chat, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll see a little symbol that says chat. Go ahead and type your question there so I can monitor and make sure we get those questions in. I'll ask you to come join the conversation, pose the question for yourself, put yourself on camera and join in the discussion as we get to each topic and the Q&A portion. So as many of you know, Jewish Free Loan Association offers zero interest, zero fee loans to anyone facing a financial challenge. We're not a bank, and we work with our clients to make sure their payments are manageable. If you're interested in learning more about our loans, whether for student loans, emergencies, small businesses, or any other reason, please visit jfla.org to see the full range of loans we offer. They're all zero interest with no fees at any time. Today, I'm really pleased to welcome Laura Gilman and Richard Rache as our panelists. Laura Gilman began her career in finance in high school, working as a bank teller. After earning her MBA from NYU and her CPA designation, she went on to roles at Smith Barney, Arthur Andersen, and other major financial institutions in New York and Los Angeles. In 2004, she launched her own wealth advisory firm, merging it with KCS Wealth Advisory in 2014. And then in 2023, merging KCS with Wealth Enhancement Group, which is a $125 billion national wealth management firm. They're based in Los Angeles. And when she's not focused on financial planning, Laura enjoys theater, golf, and world travel. Richard Rache is a mathematician who worked as a life insurance actuary and as a structured finance analyst during his 30-year corporate career. After leaving the corporate world, he taught high school mathematics at Birmingham High School and the Los Angeles Center for Enriched Studies for 7 years. After retiring from LAUSD in 2012, he became involved in math education research, working as a visiting research scholar at the USC Rossier School of Education, as well as serving on the school's board of counselors. He's also taught as an adjunct instructor at LA City College and Santa Monica College. So I welcome both of our panelists here today. And Mimi, if you'd like to put the list of questions up on the screen, that way everybody has that as a reference, and that would be fantastic. While we get that started, our first topic today is building a financial literacy foundation for yourself and creating financial confidence in your life, your world. So my first question to both of you is, when you think about financial confidence, what does that mean to you personally or professionally? And Laura, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Sure. Sorry, my light just went out.
Oh,
Thank you. Yeah, to me, financial confidence means you can sleep well at night. So many people come to us and they're just like so angst and struggled over money, and it could be a variety of different money issues. But when you have confidence in your financial situation, you have a bit of calmness and serenity, and you can worry about other things, but worrying less about finance. And I think that sort of putting sort of that house in order allows you to have less stress in a stressful world.
mhm. And Richard, from your perspective,
Mhm.
when you think about financial confidence, what comes to mind?
Well, speaking personally, I would say that financial confidence is a state in which you don't really worry about money from time to time, worrying about whether or not you can afford X, Y, or Z. But I would add that even if you think your financial situation is fine, that doesn't mean you don't worry about things like, did I pay this bill? Did I pay that bill? Because all kinds of things where will just pop into your head in the middle of the night, like I forgot to pay that bill. And so that's every time that happens to me, it's sort of a wake up call. They say, well, wait a second, you don't really need to worry about paying that bill. So why haven't you set up the auto pay? Why haven't you gotten to the point so to follow Laura that you can sleep well at night?
Mhm, mhm. And so, for someone who feels anxious or uncertain about money, whether they're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're churning about it, or there is just a low grade constant anxiety that they have, what's a first step, even a small one, that they can take to feel more in control? And Richard, we'll go with you to build on what you were just saying.
Well, what I would suggest, and so that because this is clearly based on what my experience is you sort of have to get good at knowing when and to whom the next check or payment has to be made. In other words, you have to obviously you sort of need to be on top of your budget and on top of a whole bunch of other things which we'll obviously be getting into later, but it's sort of like something that could be very simple. And so I'm just going to suggest this. I'm old. I'm an old-fashioned person, so I still use pencil and paper, and I have a you know a physical calendar and things like that. So I will sometimes write down, pay X or pay Y, and when I look at my emails, I note when I get an invoice from somebody, and I'll make a note that follow up on this invoice, because the last thing well, I don't want to be embarrassed with a late payment. And in my case, I'm fortunate enough that the penalty will not kill me. But on the other hand, if you're struggling with your finances and you really want to minimize the stress, just keep track of when things are due and how much is due, and then sort of align that with your monthly budget.
Got it. And Laura?
Well, being trained as an accountant and starting as a teller where it's all about counting your money, right? For me, knowledge is information, data is information, knowledge is power, right? So many people have no idea how much money they have in the bank. They have no idea what their 401k, like they have no idea what they've saved into their retirement accounts. They don't know what their spending is. You ask them and they have no idea what their spending is. And when you don't know, you tend to go to the worst place. I don't have any money. I don't have enough money to pay my bills. I don't know what my spending is out of control. And until you actually look at the numbers and actually pay attention, it sometimes isn't as bad as you think it is. And this
Mhm.
just happened with a client today. They're going through some changes in their lives and their jobs, and it's very stressful. And so they feel like we're not moving anywhere. We haven't made any additional income in years, like we're not growing. And then we looked at what they had and they invested in. I said, I get it. Right here, it feels like you're not growing. But all this money you put away years ago is actually still growing. And so you're actually farther ahead than you think you are. So sometimes you forget about these other pieces in your life. And so to me, really just paying it, everyone loves to stick their head in the sand. I don't want to know the market's scary. I don't want to pay attention. But paying attention actually gives you power and gives you knowledge to not worry as much.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you both. So, um, I don't see any questions for topic number 1, so I'm going to go ahead to topic number 2. If somebody has a question, don't hesitate. Go ahead and type it into the chat section. So we're going to take a look now at practical money management habits. And so what are some simple habits that you've seen make the biggest difference in day-to-day financial stability for folks? Laura.
Sure. I'm going to go what Richard was saying, budget, budget, budget. Everyone hates that word. It's a dirty word. It's terrible. But budgets, again, go to information. And if you don't know what you're spending, you can't control anything else, right? You're just, especially if we live in a very busy time and there's so much going on and we're usually exhausted all the time. We work really hard. We go home. We don't want to cook. So we order something. There's probably a lot of waste in people's budgets just because time is more valuable than money at this point. And so if money is more valuable to you, then actually understanding your budget is probably the simplest thing you can do, even if it's literally just pulling up your credit card statement and looking at how much you spent in the last month and where you spent it. So many people will be shocked at where their money goes because they don't realize how many streaming services they have or things they signed up for and forgot about, right? So kind of digging in, I think that's sort of the simplest habit is start to track your spending and understand where it goes, and that starts building wealth.
Mhm. Richard, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I'd like to build on something that Laura said about sort of credit card debt and sort of keeping track of what you're spending money on, and that's certainly very important. But there is a phrase that people may have heard. It's called "pay yourself first," and so this is well, certainly there are certain things that you have to pay even if you can't put anything additional away for savings. So that would be, for example, your rent and your utilities and things like that. Food is a little bit fudgy. You can you just deciding how many times you go out to a restaurant or something, or how many times you spend more at the supermarket or not. That's a thing. But in terms of just going back to credit cards, saving doesn't necessarily have to mean, for example, if you had an extra $100 and your choice is between putting the $100 into a savings account or your checking account, or uh, putting it over and above the minimum payment that you might have on your credit card, you're actually benefiting more from sort of reducing the amount of interest that's being charged on your credit card debt. So, yes, pay yourself first, but choose how you're going to pay yourself. The smartest way to pay yourself initially until you get all your debt under control is to pay down high interest rate loans first. And then once that's done, start actively saving.
Got it. Um, Here's a related question, which is how can people balance paying bills, managing debt, saving, especially in the circumstances where they feel very much, income is limited. I can't do it all simultaneously today.
Yeah, I'll grab that one if you don't mind. So I a lot of times that this is usually a very stressful thing. I feel like no one ever feels like they have enough income, right? I don't care if you're filthy rich or not, right? Nobody feels like they have enough to do everything they want to do. So it's important to deal with your debt. It's important to save, and it's important to pay your bills. And so I think the first thing is understanding where that money needs to go. So you only have a pot of money. It's harder to increase your income than it is to reduce your spending. So if you can understand where, like, make a list of all your major bills, all your expenses, and say, okay, what things can I cut to create more of a pool of money to put towards these various goals? And I completely agree with Richard, right? If you have debt and it's at 16, 19, 25%, you want to pay that off first. That's going to be your best value, right, for your money. But you also want to start building savings for those emergency, because then you just end up putting money back on your credit card. And this becomes a vicious cycle. So the only way to really control that cycle is to control how much money you're actually spending out for your needs. And unfortunately, what happens is some people, I found many clients, there's times in your life where you just have to be really tight with money so you can get past these hard times. And then you can start spending again, right? So it's everyone thinks if you have to, budget and tight, it's like the rest of your life is going to be that way. It's not. It's the timing. Everyone's life is different and flows differently. And so you have to look at that as a time period. If I can just get past this period, I can suck it up. I can be on that diet. I can exercise really hard, whatever it is that's important. I consider budgeting just like that, right? So you suck it up, you do it, and then you get out of it, and then maybe you get a little bit of raise, and now you have a little bit more flexibility to put towards things you want to spend. So I think finding that balance is really about finding what your spending is and where you can find extra money from.
Great, Richard.
Well, I think that I'd add that the point that Laura made about you, in addition to working on paying off the debt, you need to do some savings. We sort of we all are going to have different ideas of what constitutes stability, and but I think a working definition for most people would be, sort of to get to the point where your, say, emergency fund would be able to cover 3 to 6 months of downtimes. And also bear in mind, and this is probably particularly appropriate for some of the clients of JFLA, is that for certain things aren't negotiable. Like rent is usually non-negotiable. However, public utilities and the state have cooperated in various kinds of low-income programs where there could be, if you get into a jam, maybe there is assistance that, you don't necessarily, I mean, having JFLA there as a resource is great, but JFLA is sort of not necessarily the only resource in town, particularly when it comes to things where the state is trying to help people explicitly on utilities and some other things. So, but I think that something that people should bear in mind is that whenever there are problems, there are people and resources there to help you. So don't close in on yourself and think this is hopeless. I don't know what to do. Whatever's the case, there's probably a way to strategize a path out of it. One other thing that I might mention that is occasionally appropriate in these kinds of situations is particularly when you're married or in a relationship with another person. The two of you have not necessarily grown up with similar backgrounds in terms of how did your families deal with money and money questions and money problems. So it's easy to see how it's possible for one person to have grown up with parents who went through the Depression, and so we're very focused on financial stability, and the other person in the relationship grew up in say a family that they didn't go through that, and they weren't necessarily wealthy, but they had a greater willingness to spend on entertainment or whatever. Well, that kind of thing could easily lead to, when there's a time of stress, that's going to be something that can clearly lead to some conflict as to the appropriate or inappropriate uses of spending money. And I would just suggest that when something like that happens, don't assume that one person is always right and the other person is always wrong. Just try to get to the bottom of like where that's coming from.
Linda, can I have one quick tell to that? I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but so there's an organization called, it's a little bit of a plug, but the Financial Planning Association, and they have an organization in Los Angeles. They do a pro bono day down at the library downtown. I think they do it twice a year. I know they usually do it in October, where you can get free financial advice on these topics. So for example, and I was thinking like balancing budget, figuring out how to put money, they will sit down with you, go through your numbers and help you figure out where to go. And you don't have to, it's completely free. So it's another sort of, I know we're gonna talk about resources, but it's another great resource when you're sitting down and trying to figure this out. And maybe you didn't come up in a family that cared about this stuff or thought about this stuff, and you want to get ahead of it. There are tools that they can provide you.
And the name of the organization again?
It's called Financial Planning Association, the FPA. So I think it's FPALA. And if you put that into Google, it will send you to their website.
Fantastic. And what we've been talking about for the last little while is a reminder to me, when we say budgeting, we think everybody knows how to go from the word to the action, but they don't necessarily. In my 20s, I pulled out a piece of paper and I listed everything that was a fixed expense. I was going to have rent. I was going to have utilities every month. And I put down, my guesstimate for how much that was going to be. And then I took out my eraser and filled in the proper number after I'd paid the bill. And so that month by month, I could see what I thought I was going to spend and what I actually spent. And I did that month by month for years. The matriarch of our family, when her husband died, she was 80 years old, and she'd never had anything to do with money management. And so I suggested the first start was sort of the back of the envelope. Write down what are the known expenses, write down what are the periodic, like twice a year you go to the dentist, how much is that? And leave a line for the unexpected, like, oh, the roof suddenly had to be repaired or the pool sprung a leak or something. And over time, she does it absolutely every month. And she has a different sense of peace because it's not a mystery. She's choosing not to avoid numbers. She's looking at the numbers. So if there's an issue, she'll raise it in conversation with the accountant she works with or whatever. And so, part of this whole issue of balancing paying bills versus debt versus savings and so on, it's a mindset issue that you really can only solve if you're willing to write down numbers and look at them. So
it's the same thing if you go to the doctor, right? You go to your doctor and you have symptoms. If you only tell them, I have 8 different symptoms, but I only told them about one, right? They can't really help you. And it's the same thing. If you know where all your money's going, and even if you don't know how to solve it, you know how to you can ask the question because you have information to show someone to help you answer the question. So it's just, like I said, it's knowledge. It's really powerful.
yeah.
And I'd throw in one other thing, that's to some extent related to budgeting, is that we are constantly bombarded by so many offers from so many apps to sign up for this service or sign up for that app or whatever, and we're often being given a choice between doing something monthly or say saving 20 or 30% by doing a one-time annual payment. And so whenever you're confronted with that kind of situation, you kind of have to ask yourself, you should be asking yourself, do I think that I'm likely to be using this for more than 6 or 7 months, or wherever the break even is, with the same amount of money for the annual? If you don't think you're going to be using it long enough to justify the annual cost, then just sign up for the monthly cost, because in the long run you'll be spending less money and you're not sort of tied down quite as much, because for a lot of apps and services, they are making it increasingly difficult to unsubscribe.
And it's a trick. I mean, the way, I don't know if you've
Yes.
noticed this, but like the gamification of spending is crazy because it's, you just click a button and you buy it. And wait, I didn't mean to buy that, right? So they make it so easy to buy that you spend money without realizing. And I'm a big believer in, there's sort of a cottage tree of conscious spending and conscious investing. And the
Right.
idea really is every dollar you spend should feel really important to you. And everything you buy should be like, I really wanted this, and this, I'm going to use this for years. So many people buy things and throw them out in a week, right? is that really important? So I sort of have a rule that I actually follow. And I told my sister this years ago, and she still hears me in her head. It's if you really want something, walk out of the store. And if you go back a week later and still want it, then you can buy it. So, because usually you forget after a day, you forgot what you looked at, right? So, if you really want it, you're going to think about it all week and then go back and buy it. So, it
Right.
helps. It's just these mindsets to help you not spend money where it's super easy and all these firms are trying to get you to spend money.
Right.
It's a way to
And
protect
even
it.
the well-established merchants like say Amazon has now for the last several years been partnering with Klarna for basically you want to buy something that costs say $500 and right on the website uh, Amazon will give you the option to essentially do no interest, pay 125 a month for 4 months or something like that. And but it becomes a very slippery slope because you're
Yeah.
getting all this stuff and you think you're not spending money, and then obviously the bill comes due.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. And I appreciate bringing the mindset shift into this as well, because the challenge is staying consistent. Like I was sitting there with my spreadsheet and it was like last day of the month, I took my gas receipt. Everything had a receipt in those days. You wrote a check or you paid
You can
cash.
still ask for it.
Exactly.
That
I
too.
always do. And they look at you like, oh, you're one of
Right.
those people who wants the receipt. Yes, actually, because that way at the end of the month, I can actually stare at it and be reminded,
Mhm.
okay, where was my attention and where was my activity and what was I doing and so on. So I'm glad to bring the mindset issue into this as well. If we look at our next topic, which is planning for the future, so how do people go about beginning saving for emergencies or long-term goals, even if it's somebody with a modest income?
My biggest suggestion is start as small as you can. I'm a big fan of retirement savings, knowing what I do. And one thing that people forget is a lot of people will look at a company where their company gives them a match in their 401k. And all you have to put in, I mean, sometimes the lowest amount is $10. I mean, it can be really small. You put in 25, they may give you 25. You just doubled your money. It's like gambling, right? They're just going to keep adding. So, assuming, and I think Richard's going to agree with me, the first thing you want to do is your emergency reserve before you do that. But it's a way to magnify your savings without you having to do as much. And a lot of people think they can't afford it when it's actually something could be very low. But I always say start moving the pay yourself first, right? Take $10 out of every paycheck, have it automatically as soon as it's your bank account, go into a savings account. If you don't see it in your account, might not spend it.
Mhm.
I think I agree with everything that Laura said. To add, I would say in terms of getting started, you might want to come up with something that you call like say a found money rule in the sense that if there's a tax refund or if there's a bonus or a rebate or you do some part-time side gig or something, take some planned on percentage of that and put it into the emergency fund. In other words, don't automatically think that, uh, okay, I did, 4 hours of work for this online company and they paid me $50. Don't think that, I mean, if, don't automatically spend the $50 right away. You know, if you can afford it, it's fine to spend, say, $25 of it, but take half of it and put it in that emergency. Now, once the emergency fund is full, then you can think more about how you would want to treat found money. But probably you should always be saving some of it.
That
Yeah.
makes tremendous sense. Yeah, instead of saying, oh, look, I have this windfall, let's go spend it. It's no, let's use it to keep topping off the emergency fund. And when it's as full as we projected we wanted it, now you can call it mad money or whatever. Put it
Or
into
savings
one
for
of the other.
retirement.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, and also,
exactly.
keep in mind, by the way, that what the target for the emergency fund is. Let's say just for the sake of argument that we say it's say 3 months of expenses. Well, 3 months of expenses in 2026 is going to be different than 3 months of expenses in 2022. So if the amount of money that you have set aside covers 2022 level of expenses, you still may be a few $100s short in terms of 3 months of covering 2026 expenses. So whatever your plans are, whatever your approaches are, everything needs to be, and Laura does this all the time with her clients, every once in a while, periodically, quarterly, semi-annually, definitely at least annually, you need to reevaluate your goals and your options and where you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if we just look at the cost of food, and I think about 1 year ago, what a bag of groceries was running me versus what it's running me this year. You know, we can play all kinds of mind games and complain, but it's not the complaint that matters, it's knowing the number that matters.
Right, right.
And
Go
so go
ahead.
ahead. No, please.
Oh, I was in a Ralph's the other day looking for something, and you know how sometimes they now have in the supermarkets, it's the meat isn't all necessarily near where the butcher is. Sometimes they have some specials like as you're getting closer to the cash register and things like that because it's impulse buying and things like that. But they had a sale on 90% ground beef where the non-sale price where the sale price was $9 a pound. The non-sale price was $10 a pound. This is for just 90%. I remember like 3 years ago you could still get a steak for $10 a pound.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And what I find is it's funny. I when we learn a lot of our money lessons from our parents, good and bad. And so I used to go food shopping with my mom when I was like very young. And she was never loyal to brands. She would look for whatever was on sale. And I, to this day, still only buy things that are on sale. And so, especially in a time when food prices are going up, you can make choices. You don't have to buy the same bundle of goods that you always buy when you go to the grocery store that you've been doing for years. You can change it up. The Ralph's gives a ton of coupons, so I shop off the coupons, right? Because it's more affordable. The other thing I always tell my clients, because I think people don't really think about this, because we live in such a kind of disposable world, almost always, and I do this, you go to the grocery store and then you ended up maybe going fast food one night, you were tired, or you ordered DoorDash one night, and then you end up having fresh food that spoils and you end up throwing it out. That's literally like taking dollars out of your wallet and throwing it out. So, especially as things get more expensive, really look at, just like you would focus on your budget, focus on your grocery list. Do I need all these things? Can I wait an extra week to buy certain foods? Can I stretch it out a little bit longer? And can I not throw the food out, or maybe start buying less fresh food and more frozen food, right? Like frozen strawberries instead of fresh strawberries that like go away in 3 days if you don't eat them. If you eat them, wonderful. But if you're not, I have so many clients who literally like and I would mention this and they now are thinking about it. Not that they even thought. And then they come back to a few weeks later, like, I didn't even realize how much food I was throwing out until you mentioned it. I paid attention and now I just buy less at the grocery store because I know I'm going to eat out that week. Like I look at my calendar a week ahead and say, am I going to be eating home or am I going to be eating out? And I only buy what I know I'm going to be eating home for or taking for lunch or whatever it may be. So there are ways you can strategize, especially as these prices are going up, how to keep your budget at a reasonable level.
I think those are really great examples from both of you because when people hear planning for the future, they think, oh, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when I retire, it's like in a sense, we need to reel it back in close up. The future can be month by month. The future can be specific goals that you're setting so that you're staying present with paying attention to the money you have, what you want to do with it, can you, and if not, just having those, I'll say once a month check-ins brings the stress down because it's not happening to you. You're paying attention. It's a mindset thing again. You're paying attention and you're making decisions and choices from information. So,
It gives you back control that you don't have, right? We don't have control over how prices are going up. We don't have control over that. You do have control over what you buy and how you buy it. And you can structure it in a way that you don't feel like you're depriving yourself at the same time, right? You find these little tools that can help stay at the same level you're at, still enjoying the things you enjoy, but not going into debt and able to build a little bit of a savings or whatever it is. So you're staying in control.
mhm. So in this topic of planning, facing forward to planning, what are ways you found that people can set financial goals that actually feel motivating rather than overwhelming or depressing?
I mean, I usually start really simple and really small. Like I have found, and I went back to that, put $25, $10 away. I find if you set a big goal and you don't accomplish it the first time, you just give right up. I compare all of this to diets. I'm a female, right? So we diet a lot. And so, I fail on diets constantly. Like I try and then I make it too strict and then I don't follow it and then I cheat and I'm like, I already cheated. So why should I go back to it again? Right. So, and it's this exercise, same thing, right? Like, and what do we do, by the way? What is really popular today is all the apps that track your food eating, what you eat, how you eat it, what time of the day you eat it, what your exercise is, how much you exercise. Why can't we do this with our money? It's all the same thing. We're just using the same tools that people already have and are using in these other areas. So I always say start with, even if you don't have the big goal of I want $1,000 in my emergency reserve by the end of the year and back into it, I would just start getting in the habit of putting money away. And then once you start seeing it's working, then you can build a bigger goal and a bigger goal. But start the habit, because if you don't get in the habit, you won't be consistent doing it. And this all takes consistency.
I would add that motivation is a big factor. Having things that motivate you to stay on track is a good thing. In other words, you can have a bunch of different goals, like save a certain amount of money in 6 weeks, or pay $150 extra to this particular credit card, or whatever it is. You should you should have a why that motivates you. So, and the whys can be different. It could be, it could be something as simple as sleep better. It could be keep my car running. It could be qualify for a better apartment. It could be, raise my credit rating, or it could be, have a a great time next summer with my family, if the goal that you've got is to save for a family trip or something like that. But having the motivation will often help keep you on track when in theory you sort of still have the option to do it, but something competing comes along the way. So as an example, in terms of, to follow up with something that Laura said, if you have a lot of these diet and weight tracking apps, what that also means is that you're likely to get flooded by lots of YouTube videos and things that come from people who are selling you all kinds of supplements that are
Mhm.
guaranteed to help you lose weight in 30 days, or will help with this or help with that. So uh, and if that's what you want to get, fine. But on the other hand, having a motivation for one of your financial goals is really important, if it's an important goal.
I agree. I think it keeps you on track too, because I find if you're in the middle of a decision, like, do I buy this thing that I really want? Or do I save that money for that goal that's really important for me? I want to go on that family vacation. I have to pay my family's going. I want to be there. I have to save up for a year. Can I sacrifice this thing for this? This is more important. And so you're actually again in control making that choice, right? You're not just letting your instincts say, "Oh, I really want that. I'm going to go." You're saying, okay, that's more important. I'm willing to sacrifice this for that, because that I'll have an amazing time. I'll never forget it. It will be a lifelong, wonderful thing. And so I agree. I think having the right motivation and goals allows you to actually stick to the plan.
That's great. Um, It's wonderful. We're getting all kinds of feedback from people saying how valuable they're finding this conversation. And Byron shared that he's going to look at his Social Security check and see if it'll let him do $10 or $25 into his Navy Federal Savings account, and then use that to build credit in a secured credit card and so on.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing you can do is if they won't, have the money go into your checking account and say you know the day it goes in every day because they're pretty accurate. The next day, just have an automatic transfer go from your checking to your savings, and you can set that up within your bank.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great, because then we don't have to remind ourselves. We've value it, therefore we're setting it up in the system itself. So
Yeah, and you don't have
fantastic.
to worry about trying to fight Social Security where no one's answering the phone these days.
It's true. It's true. Exactly. So let me see if we have any questions. Thank you for the auto transfer advice. Fantastic. So our next topic is all about overcoming barriers, and we've talked a bit about the mindset side of things. There are other, I'll say, outside influences that create challenges. It could be irregular income, unexpected expenses, and so on. So, are there particular strategies for navigating when the unexpected happens?
Do you wanna go?
Hmm. Well, it's okay to go first?
Yeah, please.
Well, I've got sort of two to talk about. One on irregular income and one on debt. And for anybody who was here a year ago or thereabouts, might have talked a little bit about this, and in the last webinar on debt. But in terms of irregular income, one strategy is to do your budgeting on the lowest reliable month. Like, let's say that, for example, you've been doing something that has an income that ebbs and flows, but it ebbs and flows in a predictable way. And let's say the lowest regular month is April. Well, that should be kind of like your core place to start budgeting from. And then in those months where you're making more, you use those months to sort of smooth out whatever shortfalls there might be from only budgeting April's amount. So that's one approach. When it comes to debt, and this is important, you need to stay on top of what all of your debts are. A lot of us don't even know how many debts we've got, especially if you happen to be a student or have recently left school. But there are two basic strategies for dealing with debt in a regular way. One is what's called the snowball approach, and it's called the snowball approach because if you start off with, if for those of you who have ever been near or around snow, which I realize based on where we are does not necessarily apply to everybody in the audience, but if you start off with a snowball and you drop it in a bunch of snow and then you start rolling it, the snowball gets larger and larger. And so to some extent, that's how you build snowmen. But anyway, if you attack the smallest balances first, staying on top of the minimum payments for the others, then you're sort of like eliminating the debt smallest balance at a time, but in a way that for some people is going to seem quite manageable. The other approach is called the avalanche approach, which is where you look at which debt has the highest APR, annual percentage rate, and tackle that one first because that is the one that particular debt has the highest cost for maintaining it longer.
Those are both amazing ideas. The one thing I usually focus on is on the regular salary, regular income, someone who's on commission, someone like real estate agents, they only get paid when they sell something. What I like to do, I agree, create your budget based on your lowest month or your very base level. And then in the months that are higher, take all that money and put it in a savings account. And then you can tap into that savings account on when you have your one time once a year. Maybe you pay your insurance once a year. Maybe there's property taxes or twice a year. So you can pull that money out because you're saving the additional to either hopefully be savings, but if not, for those one-time costs that come up throughout the year. So it just evens it out a little more because you have that bit of more of a higher emergency reserve, which isn't really an emergency reserve. It's just a funnel of money you put aside to pay taxes, to pay the other stuff that comes up once a year. So you're covering your base, and then those once a year stuff take off those higher months. Don't spend and be like, oh, great, I have more money this month. I can go buy a TV. No, that's still money that needs to be spent in your budget. It's just spent at a different time. So you're going to save it for that goal and maybe make some interest on it.
That makes tremendous sense. Carla is asking, what's your opinion on the best type of credit cards? I try to use my debit card whenever possible, but there are instances such as renting a car that debit cards are not accepted.
Credit cards is a weird subject because there's so many different kinds. And so, and generally I'm a fan of paying them off every month. So if you, from a budget perspective, some people, it's very easy to have a credit card and build up debt with a credit card. That's how most people get in trouble with debt, is through credit cards. So you have to be very careful in terms of budgeting and know that you have enough money to pay it off every month if you use it. If you are using it and you're good with credit cards, to me, it's finding the one that fits, that has the most benefits in terms of either cash back, or if you travel a lot, mileage points or whatever it is, because all these credit cards give, and those can actually add up to real money if you're managing your credit cards properly. So I am a big fan, and there's the credit card guy, I think it's called the Points Guy. There's a bunch of bloggers online that you could read about how they evaluate them. Now, a lot of these might have high annual fees. So you want to find one that has either no annual fee or the lowest annual fee you could find. But I would give up on finding the low interest rate, because all credit cards after an initial period are going to have high interest rates. So if you pay it off every month, you don't pay those high interest rates.
Right. Yes, I would double down. I would double down on finding the lowest possible fees. There are quite a few cards that are available that have zero fees. I think that virtually that unless your credit score is very high, you're probably going to have a fairly high APR if you owe any money that you haven't paid off. And it could easily be in the range of between 25 and 30%,
Yeah.
Which is essentially, think of 2% interest per month. So if your debt is $1,000, you're paying an extra $20 just in interest. It's also good to be aware of what benefits you may or may not get if you're an Amazon shopper and most of the things you buy online are through Amazon, and you're an Amazon Prime member. Amazon Prime has its own credit card where you get, if you buy things that are Prime, you get 5% cash back, essentially in the form of points, which you can use for other purchases. I think that there is a fair amount of information out there that is constantly evaluating sort of the best credit cards based on what your particular needs are. And also,
One of them,
if you
one
have
of
a
them is
small
credit cards.
business,
One of
sorry,
them is creditcards.com.
okay,
You
credit
can
card,
sort
okay.
any way you want. You can look for all different types of credit cards.
Right. And then also bear in mind that, depending on what the issuing bank is and depending on your personal situation, some people may just want a personal credit card. Other people, because of the nature of what they do for a living, a business credit card may make more sense for them. But if you have both kinds of cards, then that adds the additional complication that you have to try to keep the purchases in the proper lane, in the sense of, don't use your business card to make personal purchases, and vice versa, because one of the points of having a business card presumably is that for tax purposes, it just makes a lot easier to just, have all your accounting flow to things that relate to that card, and you don't necessarily want to explain why the 5 things that you've highlighted in yellow aren't deductible because they were personal expenses.
Exactly. We've got a couple of questions here. So Mira is sharing, I've been using Relay Bank to organize my small business finances into multiple categories to allocate spending and avoid overspending. And she really recommends that. And she's curious, about using it for personal management, or is better tools or better methods that either of you can recommend?
I mean, I don't know that particular program, but I will say, like, anything that helps you track and stay on track, and it sounds like this one's working for your business. If they have it for personal, if it works for you, I would keep doing it. The key to tracking all this and understanding it is finding the system that works for you. And everybody has a different way of how they react. There's something called an envelope method, which is very old school, where you literally put rent, there goes an envelope. Every month you like take all of your cash and you put it in envelopes. And once that envelope is done, you can't spend any more money. So if your food budget is gone by 3 weeks, you're not eating the next month, the next week. All the way to using spreadsheets, to using apps. There are tons of apps now that you can do, or computer programs. There's Quicken, there's all sorts of stuff. So, and a lot of banks offer this. Personal Capital, I think, is one that does budgeting for free. You can use the app for free. So if it works for you, I would continue doing it. I think they're all great.
We have a question here that's unusual, but I think really helpful for people to understand, which the question is there a way to save money for future medical expenses from a personal injury supplement or workers' comp case?
Okay, I'm not exactly sure. Does that mean that the questioner has received a settlement and wants to save the proceeds for future medical expenses?
Stephanie, go ahead and give us more details on that. And is the question where to put those funds until you're going to be using them, or what exactly? Go ahead and expand on that question. While you're doing that, Joyce is asking, the high savings account interest rate are coming down since the Fed cut. What can we shift and get those same high rates with no risk? We don't trust the online bank sites and CDs that you can't touch. So is there anything else?
Okay, wait. So we're ruling out online bank accounts and we're ruling out CDs. Is that what I read? What I
Or I
heard?
think I just heard you say envelopes.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
But
Yeah.
I think she wants interest. She wants to earn something. Is there someplace else
right.
besides either of those that one can actually earn?
Well, essentially, the problem is that the putting high rates and no risk in the same phrase, unfortunately, doesn't really work. There's no such thing. As a matter of fact, the only way to literally have no risk is to basically have a treasury bill. And
Yeah,
that's about
But
it.
even that fluctuates in value. So
But
if you
even
want a
that will,
consistent
but
value,
even that will
right?
fluctuate in value. So,
Yeah.
probably, admittedly, CDs you can't touch, but on the other hand, you can ladder CDs so that they sort of like mature in a predictable way, and then the cash becomes available. Uh, if you don't trust the online bank sites, then to some extent you're stuck with whatever savings rate you can get from the bank,
And more.
which is usually, if it's a brick and mortar bank, it's
It's lower.
pretty low.
And
So
keep in mind, I will say a lot of the online banks, I agree. A lot of them I've never heard of. I wouldn't necessarily trust, although you always want to make sure they're FDIC insured and you're under that limit. But there are banks like Capital One Bank has an online bank. You know, a lot of these online banks are banks that are just smaller spin-offs of a larger bank. American Express has an online bank. Goldman
Mm.
Sachs has an online bank. It's called Marcus. So these are, if you were going to do the online, these are the more I would consider stable ones, but they all have generally, I haven't found one that doesn't. If it has the FDIC insurance, the government is backing it just like a treasury bill. Now the rates are going down. You can find sometimes money market funds that are a little bit higher in rates, but those are not FDIC insured. And there's been one time where they have dropped in value, and that was 2008
Yeah.
by a very small amount.
One of the participants suggested cash value life insurance.
Which is fine, except it's locking up your money. So if you need to access that money, cash value life insurance generally is you're buying life insurance and it's the cash values inside it. You can borrow against it, but you're borrowing. It's not a bank account where you have free access to your money to pull it out whenever you want.
Yeah. And if depending on how long you've had the insurance policy, there's when they calculate the cash surrender value, if you decide that you need to access the money, not borrow against it, but you just need to get at the money, then you're going to have to say surrender your policy, which means that you won't have the life coverage anymore from that policy, and then the amount of money will essentially be the excess premiums that you put in over your mortality charges less a whole bunch of fees.
Yeah.
And so it ends up basically not being it's it's a good vehicle. It's a good vehicle for forced savings. If you can afford
Long term.
a long term and if there is an economic need in your family for having it, then it's worth doing. But it should be kind of like it's like the piggy bank of last resort.
Right.
So
Okay.
we're going to finish up. Thank you. We're going to finish up with our fifth topic, which is back to encouragement and mindset. And so, is there one piece of advice or encouragement that you'd give to someone who feels like it's too late to get on track financially?
It's never too late unless you literally have a death sentence tomorrow. Like it's really never too late. I have many clients come in and they're like, I messed it all up and I've been avoiding this because I've been afraid because I messed it up. The past is the past. Nothing you can do about it. So let the past stay in the past and just focus on the future. We can always change. We can always adapt. That's what humans are. And so if you're willing to change and learn new skills, then you can. I have many people that start saving in their 50s and are still fine through retirement. So you have to catch up, but as long as you're willing to do the things you need to do to get there, you can get there.
Right. I would agree, and I would say that finances are no different than doing something about your weight, doing something about your health, doing something about your education, doing something about starting a new business. It's never too late to do anything. So that's one thing I would agree with. The other thing, though, that I would say is that uh, uh, it's important to give ourselves occasional pats on the back for doing the right thing. So,
Agreed.
for example, that's something, on those during those occasions when I'm on my periodic dieting streaks and I'm trying to stay on track more or less successfully. If I'm being successful, then what that means is once a month I get to eat a really good cheeseburger. Okay, just as an example. And, because I could have a cheeseburger every day if I wanted to, but that probably wouldn't be the best thing for my clothing. I'd probably have to spend money that I don't have on clothing. So the same thing for, if you're trying to get on track financially again, if you're trying to get on track with your budgeting. And one of the decisions that you made is I'm going to say cut back on the number of times I stop off at Starbucks or whatever your favorite place is to grab coffee. Well, if you have gotten to the end of a week or the end of a 2 week period or whatever and have met your goal for that period, there's nothing necessarily wrong with treating yourself to a visit to Starbucks.
Mhm. Who knew when Starbucks got created, it would be used in so many case studies. So Wendy's got a question. Wendy, why don't you put yourself on camera and come off of mute and share your question?
Oh, hold on. Let's see. Where is it? Oh no, that was the camera thing going here.
Oh, okay. There we go. We see you.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks for the information. I'm finding myself in a interesting predicament here. The information that you provided, I would say is great. For me, back in the day when I didn't have, my life has transformed and I'm now dealing with some disabilities. Um, so I need a different approach, a different perspective. And I've been going through some mini storms, a series of storms. So constantly I'm feeling I'm in survival mode. I'm constantly stressed. My mindset is just under attack constantly. And so I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm trying to figure out how to apply it in my world where it just feels so chaotic. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to find the balance, how to incorporate. Um, I just went through a move that was triggering for me as well. So I'm still unpacking, trying to get organized, trying to remember where things are. It was very haphazard how this move went. So, and on top of that, I noticed now that I've moved, I do feel my mindset is a lot less cluttered now. Um, as I'm unpacking, getting more organized.
Mm.
And I do feel a difference there. So where I was before, I felt I was cluttered by things. So I'm recognizing that's a weakness, shortcoming, whatever. That's a barrier for me. And Monday, I'm going to be going to a hoarding workshop at the senior center. So I'm sharing this in case if anybody else may be in similar circumstances. I'm very much connected in the mental health field as someone who has been depressed for a long time when I became homeless. But I've also learned some healthy coping strategies along the way and very involved as a community advocate now, giving back and raising a voice for others. So I'm constantly aware, about being aware, I should say, checking in on myself and doing self-care and things like that. But I need a different approach for those of us who are struggling with disabilities, um, with the clutter, and what else is going to say?
Thank you, Wendy. Look, I really
Anybody
appreciate
who's
you
been
speaking up
traumatized.
and sharing it.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah.
And because we're at the end of our time, I don't want
Oh,
to,
sure.
no, I don't want to leave it dangling. So I'm going to ask, our panelists, do they know of resources? I'm going to ask the JFLA staff that's here also. Like, sometimes what we need is a safe place where we can share what's going on that brings the stress down and increases our ability to think and problem solve.
Right, right.
So,
Okay, sure. Yeah,
so let me open it up to them since we're so close on time here.
sure.
I mean, I think part of the problem with dealing with the financial issues and all that stuff, because there are so many different everyone's situation is very unique. And when we deal with people, we start from scratch in terms of figuring out what is it actually you need, what are we trying to accomplish, what are the goals you have, because every person is very different.
Right.
And so I think sitting down and figuring out, if you can, like finding when you find that quiet space of being like, what is it I really need? What is it I'm really trying to get through? How do I do that? Then I think you can focus a little more on how the economics of that or the financial of that fits in. But I think it's in those moments when you have that, if you can find that quiet space to really figure out, because that helps eliminate the clutter, right? Like you've so much going on and it's hard to see through what you really need. And I think if you start with you and what helps you get to where you want to get to, you can start to eliminate that clutter around you, including the financial clutter.
Okay.
That's my
I just
suggestion.
know that I need to be careful making decisions when I'm not in a good space mentally.
Of
Like you
course.
said, Yeah,
I'm curious, Wendy, are you familiar with JFLA and the loan programs that it has?
I've heard of it, and I had someone did check it out, and they came back, um, what's the word? Disappointed in the sense of the criteria.
Mm.
Um, he noticed that a cosigner was needed, so he didn't even continue the process. So I just kind of, well, I didn't bother either after his.
Well, but I would encourage you, again, it's a resource in the community that knows other resources. So I would encourage you to go to jfla.org and look at the site and reach out to set up an appointment so you can have the conversation
Okay.
and find out, are there resources they can direct you
Oh,
to?
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Because they're very connected in the city and county, for instance, of the greater LA area and
Oh,
so on.
well, I sure will. I thank you for
Uh,
that.
And I would go to that FPA LA site
Oh,
because
yes,
they,
I heard
aside
that.
from the once a year, they may have other, they do a lot of pro bono services. And
Mhm.
so that, to your point of, I can't make a decision when I'm in this state, they might be able to help sit down with you and give you advice on how to, or balance your decisions. Like, is this a good decision for me to make? And they can help you evaluate that decision.
Oh, I appreciate that. So fpla.org.
FPLA.org, I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And if I could add one suggestion, and it's basically from something that Laura had said a lot earlier, when you're talking about, and Wendy, when you're talking about how when you know when things are cluttered, that makes it more difficult to make a financial decision.
Yeah.
So take a so riffing on the idea that Laura mentioned with her sister, with if you know being in a store, you know, leaving the store, and if you still want the same thing a week later, go and buy it. So
Mhm.
perhaps when you're faced with a financial decision and you're feeling cluttered, consider writing down what you'd like to do, but don't do it yet.
Mhm.
And then when you're feeling less cluttered, revisit what you wrote down
Mhm.
and say, does this still make sense for me?
Yeah.
Okay, because you want to be, because we all want to get into a situation where we control things and money, and things and money don't control us.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you again, Wendy, for bringing the topic up. I really appreciate it. So
Sure.
I want to thank you and everybody else for being here, and Laura and Richard for being our panelists. So I know that we've all learned a lot of new ways to think about this topic that can only help each of us going forward, regardless of what our circumstances is. This is our final financial literacy webinar for 2025, but we've got some exciting plans for 2026. So stay tuned for emails from JFLA in the new year for information on the upcoming webinars. And we're also going to send out a recording of this webinar so you can revisit the material. You can listen again to the topics that came up, because I know we covered a lot of different things in the past hour. Feel free to forward it to anyone you know who might find it helpful. And as always, you can also view past webinars on JFLA's YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you search on at Jewish Free Loan Association, all run together with no spaces, you'll end up with the channel where all our prior recordings are. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Be well and take care.
Bye.